I'm Todd Crawford,
I'm Eric Zavinski.
and we are too cool for the comic shop. Today we're going to be talking about what's currently a trilogy, I guess you could say. It's weird with these Marvel movies because they're all kind of incestuous, but a trilogy of movies titled Captain America, but of course not the only three to feature the character.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny. The trilogy identities, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, they actually they've played that up more recently because apparently there's these limited edition lithographs. They're like posters that are three posters, but they're one big poster. And they made those for the Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America trilogies. Today, they announced and released the art of that the day we're recording. So it actually is kind of like, made me think about that.
That's funny.
They
I
are
didn't see
trilogies,
that.
but are also incestuous, as you said.
It's funny because I don't know very many people who like any of the entire trilogies of any of these movies. It's very rare that I know
Right.
someone who's like a fan of the Iron Man series or the Thor series or a fan of like the characters and maybe they love Iron Man 1 or Thor 3 or something. But I know very few people that are like, this trilogy's great. If there is one trilogy, I
Right.
think, in the MCU that's like that so far, I think it would be Captain America. People seem the most positive on. Out of the completed trilogies, there's Guardians, which some people like both of the first ones of those quite a bit, so that could be a contender.
Yeah, I
We'll
mean,
see.
and Guardians will become a trilogy, and I think in a couple of years when Guardians 3 comes out, and I think actually Spider-Man will be 2 as of this year. So there's some other characters who are getting that honor. And Avengers is obviously a quadrilogy. All that being said, I would agree with that, and I think that's why you and I are dedicating an episode to the Captain America trilogy. I don't know if maybe in the future we could bring ourselves to do Iron Man or Thor again. Like,
I don't know if
for
I'm up
instance,
for
I
it.
think the Thor movies are kind of weak. I think the third one's probably the best. Then like Iron Man 2 is a complete dud, so that kind of like makes that trilogy a little bleh. It's like on the whole, I'm the most positive about the Captain America trilogy, but that doesn't mean I think each movie is fantastic either.
Yeah, that's more or less where I'm at. Like, Iron Man, I've never seen Iron Man 3. I was really around superhero movies by the time that came out. But yeah, the second one wasn't very good. The first one I like quite a bit. Thor, I didn't like the first Thor. I saw the second, it seemed like more of the same. From what I've seen of the third, I'm just not a Taika Cohen fan. So, like, I just don't. Like, it didn't look good to me from the scenes I've seen. And I was like,
Taika
I'll pass.
Waititi, you mean?
Taika Cohen's his real name. He changed it for the
I'm
stage.
all right.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
like
Iron
saying
Man 3 is Shane
YTT.
Black,
Cohen's
so people
easier.
like his movies.
But
Yeah, we're here to talk about Captain America, so do you want to dive into the first film? The first Avenger?
yeah, yeah. So the funny thing with the first Captain America is like usually it's the first one that's the best. Like maybe some of the examples of the other movies in the series or whatever franchise. But the thing with Captain America is the first one's kind of the weakest, which is pretty rare, I think. But I still think it's a pretty decent movie for what it is. As far as being an origin story goes, as far as just being a movie, it's a perfectly fine matinee. If you're bored on a Sunday and you went to see it, you'd probably have a good time, but you wouldn't remember it by the next Sunday.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I think most of that comes down to the character of Captain America being just really spot on, and as a character, he's very consistent from movie to movie to movie. I think that starts here pretty strongly.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the first one is, of course, a period piece, which is it makes it stand out a little bit more being a war movie set in World War II. I do think there's a certain charm to that. I think one thing that's forgotten about in this movie is the kind of Benjamin Button-esque special effect for Steve Rogers at the beginning when he's a little shrimp man, and that made it stand out a little bit when it first came out. It was like, oh, that's an exciting special effect, and at that point in time, of course, Chris Evans had been in other films, but this was he still was kind of a nobody in the general plot. It's not like everybody's like, oh, the guy from Not Another Teen Movie, but 20 years later, however long it's been, so much like Thor, it really was kind of the best thing about Captain America. Is like, oh, who's this guy? He's really good as Steve Rogers.
I will say though, he was the Human Torch in those two Fantastic Four movies.
Oh, that's right. I blocked those out of my memory. That's true. I forgot.
I don't blame you
that.
for doing that.
Yeah, I guess people did kind of know him for those. I remember that was kind of a thing. Like, oh, the Human Torch is Captain America now. So you're right.
Yeah, exactly. Which, a decade later, nobody would ever say that because he's known for Captain America. And again, nobody wants to remember those Fantastic Four movies.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I'm recording from PA, and we have a law here against bringing those movies up. We're not allowed to talk about them here.
Good to know. Man, I think that Indiana has the same rule for the reboot they did.
Yeah.
Will they ever get Fantastic Four right? Probably not.
No, I don't think so. I heard they were going to do a John Krasinski one they talked about, and I like him. And I liked A Quiet Place 1 a lot. And the second one I wasn't so hot about, but it's still a fine movie. So I was open to that. I think that he could kind of pull off that charming tone, but it sounds like they're probably not going that direction, so fuck it. I think some things just weren't made for modern film. And I think Fantastic Four, at this point, has repeatedly proven that it isn't. I think if they do a cartoon or something, they'd have much more success.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. Then Captain America, for some reason, it kind of does work, even though it's very much, that character's origin is baked into World War II.
Yeah,
and all things considered, I think they handle it pretty well. It feels kind of like, before the MCU kind of went off in a bunch of crazy directions, it does just maybe feel like most faithful of most of these MCU movies, like the first Captain America.
I definitely agree, and I think certain aspects too, it was before really Joss Whedon took over. I think it was Iron Man, Thor, and then this was the third to come out. We're not counting Hulk because that's a weird kind of black horse or dark horse in general.
Yeah, I think Iron Man 2 had actually come out before Captain America.
You're right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Which is kind of
not many movies. A couple that don't really matter.
But anyhow, so it wasn't full on quip fest yet. It still had levity, of course. It's not like actually Bergman films a lot of jokes, but it's not like Tarkovsky or something. But it does take itself seriously to a degree enough that you can invest in the characters and the story. And
right.
And I think that that's really necessary in a film like this, because when you have a bunch of Nazis and stuff, even though it is kind of cartoony, they are it's Indiana Jones-esque, really, in terms of how they're approached, whether they're the bad guys, and you're not seeing them do the heinous things, but you can only take it to some degree of comic book when you're dealing with actual Nazis. You can't get too goofy with that, in my opinion. You can do the Nazi zombies and stuff like that. I see all the time, but I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I just find it distasteful a lot of the time. And for a mainstream film like this, I think it did a very good job of balancing the comic bookness and the historical stuff, where it's even Steve Rogers' patriotism, which I think really comes into play and is challenged in the next few movies. It all works really well, which may not sound like much, but I actually think it's one of the better feats of the film, is that it manages to be a movie about a superhero fighting Nazis that isn't completely over-the-top goofy and isn't just Saving Private Ryan. It actually gets a pretty good blend of both in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think they know where to put the goofier elements of the movie. Because there'll be certain scenes that are about America jumping on a grenade in boot camp and all this kind of, super sappy stuff, but also not completely comic booky stuff. But then, the villain Red Skull is very much this is not Hitler, this is comic book villain. I think they do blend those two elements pretty well together overall.
Yeah, I do too, and it's funny because that's really my thoughts in general on Captain America: The First Avenger. Is just It's fine. It's decent. It's almost a boring movie to talk about, and this sense that like there's not really many complexities. It's not like I'm like, oh, this part really sucked or this was amazing, this scene. Really, overall, it's just a solid product. It's just a good movie.
Yeah, like you said, it's just kind of a fun, kind of sleepy movie to watch in the middle of the day kind of thing. Like if I were to actually, and I did this, before Avengers Endgame, my brother and I kind of, we marathon through the MCU movies, which, maybe meant we like did movies a day on a couple weekend days or, whatever. This is not a one of those movies to like end a night with. Maybe like watch this one and then watch another one. It's maybe more exciting later on.
Yeah, no, I've always felt like this was a movie that you'd see on like FX or something in the middle of the day, or you're at a bar and it's playing, and you kind of watch it while you're having conversation, just read the subtitles. It seems like one of those movies to me, rather than like, yeah, like you said, I would not watch this movie after 8 at night.
Yeah, right. It's your grandpa's superhero movie.
Yeah, it really is. It's for the history. If you love History Channel, then this will be your favorite of the early Marvel movies.
Pretty much. So, I mean, I guess if that's the feel that's going for, it's going right. That being said, it's kind of funny how I think it's easy to forget this movie introduces more than it does at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, when I think about this movie, I just think about Captain America fights in World War II. He has a very, whatever relationship with Peggy, which is like, it's cute, but it's also not like stellar romance. Like maybe compared to some of the other Marvel romances, like it's better than most, but I don't think there are really any romances in these MCU movies that are like great. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like I think about those couple things and like the villain being super cheesy. Oh yeah, and like Tommy Lee Jones is in this movie, which is like easy to forget.
Yeah, he's so typecast in it too that it's almost like
really is.
You think like, was that Tommy Lee Jones, or just somebody that I'm thinking was Tommy Lee Jones because it's a Tommy Lee Jones character?
Yeah, I mean it works well. It's also like I remember watching this back in I think it was 2011. It's like when Bucky died, never did I think that character would come back, and I don't think I knew much about comic books or whatever, so it's like, well, Bucky is the sidekick of Captain America. And it's like when watching this movie as a kid, I didn't think of it in that way at the time, but now I look at it and it's like, oh no, they basically setting up that character for the remainder of movies. And then this movie also has the frickin' Tesseract, which is basically the first proper Infinity Stone as well. It's like, this movie does set up a lot. It just doesn't feel like it does.
I forget the first name, but Tony Stark's father is in this as well.
Oh, right, yeah. I mean, Howard Stark is in this movie too. So this movie does like tie a lot together and set a lot of stuff up. Somehow does it without feeling like it does, which I guess is another point in its favor, I suppose.
Yeah, especially because in my honest opinion, a lot of stuff in these movies, like it's praised for the world building stuff, the MCU. I think a lot of it's really lazy and cheap most of the time. I think like Infinity War does a pretty good job at it. I think that's very impressive. But like in Thor, for instance, around the same time as this, when they're first laying the groundwork, it was just shit where it was like, is this one of Stark's guys? It'd just be stuff like that was just so like wink at the audience. And whatever, the kids.
Or sometimes there are examples where it comes out of nowhere, like Spider-Man in Civil War, for example, which we'll talk about later. Like it just kind of, Spider-Man exists now, all of a sudden. And in reality, it's because studio got the rights to do it. That's why it comes out of nowhere in this movie, stuff like that.
Exactly. And I think the first Captain America does a good job balancing all those things once again, like where it feels natural to the plot, where if this was the only movie you saw and it was just a movie, not a part of a series, there's no sequels, you could still just watch it. and it's still enjoyable, just as enjoyable, really. But if you also
Right.
are looking for those Easter eggs, then it's not going to make or break the movie. Like, you could probably even just skip it and not miss that much, really. But, and that's kind of what I like about it. I like that it stands on its own. I like that it feels a little bit more unique, especially early on in the series. I think this might even been before Disney acquired the rights. I'm not sure about that. But, yeah.
I can't remember actually.
I don't think
That
it's
specifically
Iron
happened.
Man
But
1 good. It's not Iron Man 2 bad. It's not Thor forgettable. It's just a solid entry.
yeah, what would that turn out to be for a letter grade then for you?
Letter grade, that's probably a little bit easier than a number grade. I would give it, it's going to sound a little harsh, but it really isn't, a B minus. Because a B, I feel like I want to watch like once every other year, once yearly or something like that. I could see myself watching this if it's on TV, but I do like
Oh.
it.
I can agree with that. B minus it is. Got your too cool for the comic shop approved B minus from both parties.
The official rating. I have to update Rotten
Absolutely.
Tomatoes. So the next one then is Winter Soldier, which is a huge change in every way from the first Captain America.
Yes. And I will say, for some reason or another, maybe I just wasn't impressed by the trailers that much or something. I wasn't like excited for the Winter Soldier like going into the film. I think it was like 2014 was maybe the first time I was getting a little bit older, experiencing a little bit of Marvel burnout because Avengers was good. I liked it, but it wasn't like life changing. I didn't like it as much as any of my friends for the most part. And then Iron Man 3 was like eh. And then Thor 3, or not, sorry, not Thor 2 was eh as well. And then, so Captain America 2, I just didn't have a lot of faith in going in. And I remember watching it for the first time, and I was like, oh man, I was way wrong. This is the best one so far.
Yeah, pretty much. And it is funny, yeah, because I remember around the time before it came out, there was Thor, which is so funny, because I remember that being hyped. Like, we got the Game of Thrones, guys. This is going to be like Lord of the Rings. And it came out, it was just like, like I said, to me, it was just Thor once again, but a little bit stupider. But like, I wasn't into Avengers. Like, I saw it in theaters and it was like entertaining enough for a watch, but I think I blame it for degrading the quality of blockbusters in America for a long time. I talked about this before, how like Joss Whedon shot for TV rather than theaters, and just like the way that it's filmed and directed is so poor. And it did a lot of good. It accomplished certain things that I have to give credit for, but overall I was not impressed with it. And I think it I heard people saying when it came, like, this is like the next Indiana Jones or something. Like, no, it's not. And I think time proved that it was not. I think you can safely say at this point in time, looking back and seeing how the Russos, who began with Winter Soldier, handled Avengers, I think it's quite clear that the original two films could have been much better.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Honing in on this one, yeah, I remember the posters. There was like the typical Marvel characters standing in front of things, and it was being parodied at that point on the internet, and it just looked like another movie. And then like when it came out, it was like, no, this is like the Dark Knight of the MCU. And I personally wouldn't hold it in that high of esteem. I do have some slight issues with it, but overall, it's about as good as the MCU gets to this day. I think it's still right up there with the best of them. And
I agree. It's definitely in like my top three. It's hard to rank the top couple films, I think, in the MCU for me. But it's definitely upper echelon. At the end of the day, it is still an MCU movie. There are still quips, there are still dumb jokes, there are still, a little dash of that in this, but on the whole, it going for a more unexpected, darker tone. It's not doing it in kind of like an edgy way like Iron Man 3 was doing for a while, and then abandoned that tone halfway through the film and then became a little stupid. Actually committed to something, and it made Captain America not be a poster boy for America. So I mean, that's totally what they were going for in the first Avenger and the Avengers. There's actually like a compelling like, oh, he's standing his own moral ground and kind of carving his own path because he just kind of stays who he is and doesn't really budge. So I think instead he has to stand up to way more, not just like the Nazi villains who are like part of America, but also just kind of criticizing part of Shield and all that stuff. I think it's just kind of makes the character more endearing in this movie.
Yeah, I think it's more challenging to him and how he viewed the character, and it makes him more interesting because even though he's literally Captain America, he's a patriot, it shows that he can care about something enough to not just blindly accept everything that it does. So when he's going up against his own government, I think naturally it creates just a more interesting dynamic. And same with even the villain in the title of the film, the Winter Soldier, being Bucky. And this is someone he cares about. He doesn't want to kill this guy. It's not just, evil demon Hitler. It's someone that he has a personal connection to. And he's trying, just like America, the country, he's trying to basically redeem Bucky and get him back on the right path the entire movie, even as Bucky is killing people and trying to kill him.
Oh, absolutely. And they add a couple new characters in the mix too here in this movie, who would later become more and more important. The Falcon makes his introduction in this movie, and I always kind of like Falcon. Him and Bucky now have their own TV show, which I also enjoy quite a bit. But yeah, that all started here. And then I think, you say Winter Soldier is the villain. I actually really like Robert Redford's Alexander Pierce villain character. I think at this time in the MCU, was one of the more interesting villains for sure.
Yeah, that's very true. I forgot that he was in this one for some reason, but those are good. We also get some returning characters I think are given some depth and a lot to do here. Like you get Samuel Jackson and Scarlett Johansson are both back in their respective roles, and I think that they're used quite well. I think that Scarlett Johansson, she had a pretty big role in Avengers, but really Samuel Jackson, this one, like there's a scene where it's a big set piece. And once again, going back to like grounding the character and making it like real world, not goofy. They shoot this like a Bourne Identity movie or something. It's very quick cut, modern action movie, and it works. It works really well. I guess The Raid was all the hype and action back then, and there's parkour was a big thing. So it was like basically taking on those cinematic techniques, and it really worked. The handheld camera, everything made it very visceral. It works with the Shield dynamic. But anyhow, there's a scene eventually where you think that Samuel Jackson's character is being killed off, and it's pretty intense, and you actually think the stakes are raised at that point, even though of course he's back and continues to be in the films. It's still very dramatic and tense, even though okay, this is a kid's movie, they're probably not just going to kill him, they got to make more movies. It still works pretty well, I think, and that is the core of the movie. Like you said, it does have the quips, it does have the big giant fight at the end, but everything's just done better and smarter than the other films. It takes the same tropes and just makes it a little more natural, I think. It's all in the execution.
Yeah, and like you said, stakes are actually like a part of this film too. Things do feel a little more, violent and death-defying in this movie because I think it, kind of owes to it being shot like a spy thriller. But back to your comment about Nick Fury, but I would also say Black Widow. Like, this movie was the first movie I even remotely took either of those two characters, like, seriously. The past appearances, like Iron Man 2, Avengers, etc., both of those characters felt like they were just, there for the cameos or there to be like one note, fill their role, that's it. Chris, in this movie, I would say both of them actually just get some depth. They get some lines. They get some time in the script to actually do something other than like recruit an Avenger or be a sexy redhead.
Yeah, speaking of the sexualization to Black Widow, it irritates me in both of these sequels that they have to have the obligatory Marvel kiss scene. And they do it in this one. It's a little bit more, it's definitely better than what they do in the third movie. But it's basically the Inception thing, as I recall, where it's like, oh, we need to hide or whatever, kiss me real quick. And once again, it's done a little more clever than the other movies. It's not as forced of a romance or something. But I do have to point that out because that's going to be a bigger point in the third movie once we talk about that. It's
Oh yeah, it is like one of those obligatory movie moments, just like how Chris Hemsworth is, I think, probably shirtless at least one point in every movie he's in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a requirement. Yeah, I mean, I think this movie really kind of, it was good, especially the first time Captain America breaks out of Shield headquarters and like beats up dudes in the elevator and like jumps out a window and like destroys a jet while running on top of it and landing on a motorcycle. First of all, like I was like, shit, action has not looked that good in any of these Marvel movies. What happened?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's so weird because I think these guys were just they were on the show Community, and then they just did this, which
hell yeah, dude, which is a show I love. So it's just kind of this is a transition. This is definitely a big transition.
Yeah, well, I had a conversation recently. It was actually with a dude that makes he works on like the dubs, the Spanish dubs for these Marvel movies, and he was saying that Scorsese couldn't have made a film like Infinity War, and I'm like, yeah, he could. Anybody could. If you get these like if you get like the stunt coordinators and cast and cinematographer, you could put anybody in the director's chair. As long as they know what they're doing to some degree, you know. Like if the Community guys can do it.
Yeah, that's kind of a good point, right?
But
this movie really caught my attention though, kind of towards the middle. It was really probably the first effective plot twist of all the MCU films, and I'm trying to count. I think there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think this was the 9th Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, if I'm counting correctly. So this was the first of 9 movies, in my opinion. It had a plot twist that was good and it worked, and that, of course, is the fact that Hydra been a mole inside Shield all these years, which really changes up like basically the entire universe that these characters live in, and that has ramifications. Like, I think even throughout like current movies and TV shows in this universe, and that was the first time where I was like, wow, they're actually going to take like interesting plot decisions and move forward with that. Like, that's pretty cool.
yeah, exactly. And like you said, even when this movie came out, you're like, oh, this changes things, and this is a twist. Like up until this point, I really could not stand how narratively lazy the MCU movies were. It was just the same.
Like, would you agree that there is no twist in the other 8 movies before this? Like, I don't think you've seen them all, but I can't think of any.
I haven't seen them all, but I don't always say this, but in college I used to say this, like Matt Stone and Trey Parker with South Park, they break down like story time to and but, where it's like this happens and this, but, and I think their rule is you can't use the same adjective or the same conjunction twice. And how I feel is Marvel is just using the same conjunction ad infinitum, and it's just monotonous and boring. That's a gross oversimplification.
I mean,
on my
there's
part.
not even
I
any
own
stows
that,
or yets. They're just like and. Sometimes the Marvel movies don't feel like there's like cause and effect between scenes even. It's just like, all right, good guy, bad guy, funny scene, bad guy scene. Like, yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And the Winter Soldier actually feels like it has structure that needs to be there.
Exactly. And in the movies that up until this point didn't even seem to take themselves seriously by Avengers, where like the defeat of Loki is essentially a gag. how it's performed and everything. In this film, it does have levity, like you said with Falcon. You know, he's in there. He adds a lot of levity. He's a good modern character that's kind of the avatar for the audience, especially at the beginning. And his contrast being a normal soldier versus Captain America with this super serum shit. It's humorous, it's funny, and they have an endearing friendship, which once again parallels his with Bucky's. And yeah, it's just if the first film was just an example of a good, decent movie, this is a pretty good example of what everything a sequel should do. The only real criticism I have of the film is it's kind of silly too, but there's just one scene where they're in a room and there's like a face on the TV that's like, you're gonna be bombed. It's like an evil Nazi data thing or whatever, and it's just a little bit too much for this particular movie. The tone just felt off and just takes me out of it. It's hardly even a solid complaint. I'm not saying like this makes it a bad movie. It's just something that every time that I've seen, I'm always like, that's a little weird. I don't know.
There's a bomb in a vase. I don't think I remember this.
No. It's in a room. And there's like a computer that's talking to them.
Oh.
And they have to like get out of the room or some shit. It's very, very video game like.
Oh, I think that's the very same. Yeah. Okay, no, that's the very same scene with the plot twist, though, where it's like, I am the second or third tier villain of the first movie, and I have made sure that Hydra is in S.H.I.E.L.D. all along, and then the whole place blows up.
Yeah, I think that's it. Just like the way that.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about now. It's a little bit cheesy, but it's also like coming from a character who ties it back to the first movie, so I think it's okay for that scene, but.
Yeah, like I said, it's not like a deal breaker or anything, but it's just something that like I'm always like a little iffy on how it was done. I don't know.
I will say definitely one of the strongest finales in the movies. That last fight with Steve and Bucky, that helicarrier is pretty epic, and it's definitely by no means like choreographically speaking like the most iconic or anything like that, but it's definitely got to be the most character-driven final confrontation. Definitely in the movies at this point, but probably just in the MCU as a whole.
Exactly, it has pathos, and I think that helps so much.
I always love rewatching this movie because of all those things. It feels like there's some sort of emotional character stake, and what's the emotional character stake of the Avengers? Thor and his brother are bickering for like they always do.
There's a giant laser in the middle of New York City.
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite lines from the Avengers movie is like, or like kind of, bust Loki up a little bit, and he's like, "Look at this. Is this what you wanted?" It's like it's a moment that lasts for like 5 seconds, and the movie goes back to like being dumb, like immediately.
Yeah, that's how it always is. It really shows how much of a beta male that Joss Whedon is and how little of a visionary
it really does.
Because the whole thing, and I mean this, is the whole thing lacks conviction, where he breaks up any moment of seriousness with levity because he can't hold a moment, because he's not courageous enough to. He thinks he'll be criticized if he truly tries. And so he breaks it up with this meta commentary continuously. But really it just reeks, in my opinion, of narrative insecurity.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. We're not big Avengers fans here. I think it's a all right enough movie. It's not like the worst thing, like I said. But hey, we're here to talk to Winter Soldier. I mean, so all in all,
but it's hard to talk about these films, especially the third, without bringing up Avengers 2, especially.
That is actually very true. But before we do that, do you want to rate a Winter Soldier?
Yeah, I think I'd give it a B+. I feel pretty confident in that.
Yeah, no, this is this is an A- movie for me, I think, at worst. And then if I'm feeling my normal Captain America spirit, it's an A for me. It's not an A+. It's not like, it isn't The Dark Knight, just to make that clear. It's like an S tier. It's not even like on the letter spectrum, but especially compared to the cream that's associated with, the crop that it's associated with, is just like Winter Soldier is good, and Captain America has always been like my Avenger. So I just enjoy watching the Winter Soldier. It's one of those few movies that it's one of the best MCU movies. It's also one of the most standalone that I can enjoy it, right? Every time I, want to watch Infinity War or Endgame, I feel like I have to watch like the other one with it. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
the other, and like Guardians 1 and 2, I like both of those a lot, but they kind of feel like they come together as a package. Whereas, the Winter Soldier, I think, stands alone super well. So for me, it almost is like the best standalone movie in the whole MCU, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. Of the films that I've seen, I think there's only three that I would consider legitimately good films. And that's not saying they're the only three I enjoy at all, but the only three that I respect as films would be Iron Man, Winter Soldier, and Infinity War. I like some of the others, but those are the only three that I'm like solid, like these are good movies.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, those are three of the higher tier ones for sure. You know, you haven't seen them all either.
Yeah, I
Like,
haven't
what,
seen
have you
some
seen
of
like half of
those.
the MCU or something?
Probably something like that.
Yeah. But, no, that's pretty much a good take. Yeah, no, things get complicated and blurred when you talk about the third movie in this trilogy, because you mentioned Avengers Age of Ultron briefly. You have to know what's going on in that movie, which was a year after Winter Soldier, to understand what's going to happen in Captain America 3. Captain America 3 is really Avengers 2.5.
Yeah, it
It's
really
the
feels. It's really weird because I know that Avengers had production hell and Whedon was pissed and the studio was pissed, and it just seemed like they knew it was going to be a disappointment, and then it was for most people. So they immediately tried to make Captain America 3 Avengers 3 because Winter Soldier was so loved.
right. And I don't dislike this movie, but I think it must be said that it is, compared to Iron Man 3 and Thor 3, whatever your opinions are on those movies, I feel like they were more clearly about just Iron Man or just Thor. Whereas this movie's about a lot of things. Captain America is still like the protagonist of the film. There's a very prominent disagreement between, two halves of all the heroes. And I feel like the movie leans you toward Captain America's side. I did know a lot of people who, were more inclined to agree with Iron Man on the whole Sokovia Accords debate and all that. And I think they're trying to pit the audience against each other too. But I really think the movie is trying to steer you a specific way, though. That being said, there's a lot of other crap going on in this movie as well.
Yeah, it's mostly Captain America's perspective. I say like maybe 60% his perspective, and then
Yeah,
40%,
I would say that's fair.
maybe like 20% Tony's, and then 20% just general Avengers shit. And the thing that sucks with this movie to me so much is that I think it's two different films, like we already discussed with Avengers versus just Captain America 3. But what sucks is that the quality between the two is so like disparaging. Where the stuff that's just a sequel to Winter Soldier is really good, and I think probably at the same level of quality that you saw in the previous film, roughly. Some of it may be a little better, some
Right.
of it may be a little worse. Unfortunately, the part of it that's just an Avengers sequel is really kind of just on par with the previous two Avengers movies, in my opinion. I really, really do not appreciate the fight in the airport. And that's a lot of the movie. It's like 20 minutes roughly. And I do not like the detour to Aunt May's apartment. And all that takes me so far out of the movie that I haven't seen it since theaters, even though I enjoyed the movie quite a bit. Just that middle section is just an Oreo, just a shit filling.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think that's honestly, you put it better than I have ever been able to put it. because like I do like this movie. I have to remind myself that I like this movie, but you're completely right. Making sense of it as two different films, I think is the best way to think about it because the 40% that's an Avengers Ultron sequel, I don't care for that much, but actual Captain America part of this movie is the part I like. The Civil War part that was so hyped up is it's just so artificial. You know, the conflict I think between it's Steve and Tony. I think their conflict makes sense, right? Because Steve is on one side of the argument because basically don't tread on me. We didn't do anything wrong. Why should we like let go of our free will, right? Captain America is about freedom. That's basically what it boils down to. Then Tony is pretty much racked with guilt that he like made Ultron. Probably a bad move, so he doesn't really trust himself, and that's like part of Tony's character arc. I understand their fundamental conflict. Which obviously gets way more personal at the end of the film with the big twist at the end. But the fact that they actually have to force and pit like dozen other characters against each other just feels really cheap in this movie to me.
It really does, and it really just feels like you said, it feels like just a cut below the standard that Captain America's now proven itself with two films where it's just a dumb blockbuster for some of it, and the film's smarter than that. It's better than that. And I think audiences expected and deserved better than that. And I don't blame the Russos at all. I think even seeing their work in the later Avengers films, they handle huge fights with multiple characters much better and with much more finesse. It seems so clear, and I think at this point the MCU used to storyboard all the action sequences for the directors. That was a studio thing, which I think was a huge issue with their action sequences a lot of the time. And I think it really shows here. Maybe I'm mistaken, but it feels exactly like the studio is like, no, we want Ant-Man, we want to get Giant, we want to see, Scarlet Witch shoot at Iron Man, and we want to see this and that. And meanwhile, these directors are like, yeah, but we're trying to tell this story. What do we do? And they're just like, just put it in there. Just make it happen. We need a trailer.
Hey, that's exactly it. I remember a lot of people saying that the airport fight scene was like new gold standard for fight scenes in a Marvel movie. And from the very first time I saw the movie, I didn't get it. I didn't get that at all.
I felt the same way, and I remember those conversations. Same with, so I'm just gonna say it. I fucking hate was it Tom Holland's Spider-Man? I don't.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've kind of warmed up to his Spider-Man more instead of less over time. But in 2016, I was not into it at all.
Yeah,
he's not well utilized in this film.
I don't like so. In this film, I don't like how he's utilized at all. It's shoehorned in. They do what they can. I like his moment with Captain America where they talk about which parts of Philly they're from or whatever. That's cute and kind of speaks to both characters and their mentality as they're fighting and all that. That's a nice little
They're from New York, buddy.
Yeah.
They're from Philadelphia. I want to read those comics where Spider-Man and Cap are from Philadelphia.
Yeah. It's that hour. I'm trying to avoid names and specific locations because like the dementia's setting in for the night. But
yeah, right. No, I understand.
This is off topic. I'll be real quick. I was reading a book a few months ago, and it talked about this was Joseph Campbell. He mentioned how life repeats itself and the symbolisms daily life that we take for granted. One thing brought up that was fascinating was how every morning you're essentially born again. You live your life over the course of the day. And then you lay down to rest at night, like a synthetic death, which is not an original concept, of course, and that kind of stuck with me. But I think the forgetfulness at the end of the night for me, it's basically just dementia. This is what I'm going to be like when I'm like 80, but all the time.
Okay, I was wondering where you're getting with that, but I understand now. You're at the end of life. You need end of life care, Todd.
Yeah, but so anyhow. Yeah, like, with Tom Holland Spider-Man, like, in my opinion, especially in Homecoming, he was just Iron Boy. He's not even Spider-Man. I've known so many people that are like, oh, he's just like Spider-Man in the comics. He's just a little kid who's just like this. And I've read a ton of Spider-Man comics, more than anybody should. He's not like how he is in these movies in the comics. The whole, do you remember that really old movie, Empire Strikes Back? Do you remember that really old movie, Aliens? That's not Spider-Man. Maybe in like alternate
Oh,
Spider-Man.
I hate that so much.
But this
That
idea
line
that
kills me.
it's terror, and of course it's like Disney just acquired the rights to Star Wars and Spider-Man, so it's like he had to mention a property they recently got the rights to and all that. But like, and I don't mind a different take on Spider-Man. I just think this was a bad one, and I think once again in Infinity War and Endgame he's used very well, and I like him in those movies. I think that Spider-Man Homecoming is one of the biggest pieces of shit I've ever seen. One of the legitimate, like, less than 3 out of 10s I give, and I couldn't finish it. But in this movie, his inclusion and the detour it takes from the plot and characters I am interested in really hurts it for me a lot. It's a major speed bump.
Exactly. Not to mention there's other stuff the movie wastes time with, like the WandaVision romance, which, I mean, at least those characters got fleshed out in a TV show recently. But, you know, that wouldn't happen until 5 years later, right? So it's like there's a lot of things in this movie that just feel like they're wasting your time. Like the villain is introduced in a very drawn out, prolonged, stupid scene of him like drowning a dude upside down in a sink. When you like look back on the full scope of the movie, like that doesn't even make any sense to be in there.
With that said, I have to point out that I am so happy that Daniel Bruhl gets work and is well known and respected in America. I know him from a movie called Goodbye Lenin, which is just an amazing dark comedy about he's a young communist, his mother's a communist, and it's when the Berlin Wall is torn down, and she has a near-death experience, and she's very fragile, and her son, Daniel Bruhl, is told, you know, take care of her. If she has any major shocks, it could be fatal for her. So he makes it seem as though communism is still, like, the thing, and that the wall's still there. So he's trying to keep her insulated in this room by creating this fantasy world, and it's just a really great comedy about family and the lengths that you'll go to save them, and he's just really great in that film. So when I saw him in this, I know he had been in Inglourious Basterds and some other things, a racing movie with Thor, but seeing him in this in a Marvel movie is just really exciting for me because I had liked him for quite a while since he was a younger actor for that.
And I don't even dislike him as a villain. I just don't think he's even used well half the time in this movie.
Not. It's nice seeing a familiar face, but it's like basically the Marvel villain thing where it's like he's an evil guy, and
right. And they don't even give you any motivation for it until like the very end of the film. Which I will say, just to skip ahead, because I could talk too long for all the dumb things this movie wastes my time with. Because this movie's 2.5 hours long, and it doesn't need to be. It really doesn't.
Honestly, if this movie was an hour 40 minutes, I'd probably give it in the A's. Is the funny thing.
Yeah, right. Like at the most, it should be a crisp 2 hours, like Winter Soldier, but it's not. It's too long. Superhero movies were getting bold and stupid with their length at this time. It was 2016. BVS was 2.5 hours. Civil War is 2.5 hours. Like X-Men Apocalypse was 2.5 hours, and just like over and over and over again, superhero movies are like 2.5 hours, and I got so sick of it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Movies, if not like all of those movies, were like, I could see this being 2 hours and being better, you know?
Well, for this one thing I want to bring up, because we're saying a lot of negative things about the Avengers stuff, one part that stood out to me as a huge positive I really liked and thought was done well was the backstory of Black Panther and how that was done. Because he was introduced in this film, and I think that's actually done very well. The scene with the bomb where his father's killed is shocking. When he comes out, it's exciting. The way they film it makes it like, oh, that's how you do Black Panther in a film, and it really works. The casting was great.
Yes.
Ironically, coming into the film knowing nothing about Black Panther, and to this day I still know very little about Black Panther, versus being like a Spider-Man fan or something, I actually was more excited to see Black Panther as someone unfamiliar with that character.
And that just goes to show, and that's a great point, and thanks for bringing that up, because Black Panther is a new character that they're introduced into this movie, but it feels right. It feels like it's woven into the plot. Spider-Man, on the other hand, does not. It was completely shoehorned in. It really is shoehorned in. Like Tony Stark knows this kid all of a sudden out of the blue with no explanation. Whereas, Black Panther, he's a son of the king of a member of the United Nations. There's some sort of sense behind it. And then once he gets killed, there's obviously a revenge plot and a miscommunication as to why he ends up fighting for one of the two sides in this movie. So that is done very well.
You know what I think the
and
difference
that
is?
into the standalone Black Panther movie, I think, well as well.
This was right when Disney got like the temporary rights to Spider-Man or whatever the negotiation is now. Sony still owns a character. This was right after Amazing Spider-Man 2. And Sony all of a sudden was like, oh, we don't know how to make Spider-Man work. We don't know how to do this. So I think they were very strict with like, he needs to be like Iron Man. We want him in everything Spider-Man. Spider-Man isn't good enough. We need to get him associated with Iron Man. So I think that was a lot of it where Sony was like, put him in here, make this happen. And Marvel and Disney was like, yeah, we want to rebound from Avengers 2. What better way to do it than bring fucking Spider-Man in here? And so I think it was like a mix of that. Whereas I bet Black Panther was probably talked about from a much earlier stage in pre-production, is my guess.
Yeah, there wasn't as much riding on Black Panther, which is ironic because the standalone Black Panther movie ended up becoming one of the best grossing movies of all time.
Yeah, it's really funny how that worked out, and it really just goes to show that I like Mark Webb. I liked his film 500 Days of Summer. I liked some of the music videos he did. I think he's a town director, but like I think he does a certain kind of movie that may not have been the best fit for Spider-Man. Even though I did like Amazing Spider-Man when it came out, it didn't quite.
The Amazing Spider-Man is better than Spider-Man Homecoming. I take that any day of the week.
Yeah, same. I definitely prefer.
I think most people would rather take Homecoming, which is just gross to me.
Yeah, I don't have anything positive to say about Homecoming. I didn't finish it. I hear it gets better with the Michael Keaton stuff, but I couldn't last. It
gets a little bit better. I don't think... I actually prefer the sequel, Far From Home. I think it's a lot better than Homecoming. I think Spider-Man actually becomes kind of his more... He grows out of the whole Iron Boy thing a little bit in Far From Home. Because, spoilers, Iron Man's dead. So, it really helps the character quite a bit. So I enjoy that movie a lot more.
Speaking of death, even though I do like that he gets to stick around and everything, I do kind of wish that, who the fuck? There's too many bird character names. I'm running through like Falcon, Hawkeye, some Rhodey. Is that it?
He doesn't die.
Yeah, but he gets shot down, and it's like a fake out.
Yeah,
I do wonder.
Which honestly, to this day, I think he should have died in that scene.
Yeah, I didn't want him to die, but I wanted him to die and me to feel bad about it, if that makes sense. Like I like that character,
I want him to die in the sense that this movie should have some sort of stakes.
Exactly, and for Civil War, that has a body count of like 0.
Yeah, no, exactly it. Well, and it's like it really would have been an impactful scene. It's like, Vision, this supercomputer, is like, who's he trying to take down? Falcon, I think. And Falcon dodges, does a somersault, and ends up hitting one of his own guys. And then, War Machine, Iron Patriot, whatever the hell you want to call him, like falls 100 feet from the air, at least, like lands in a crater. But he lived, like, apparently. That's fine. You can...
Exactly.
Yeah, whatever. He got, like, shot in the chest by, like, a giant laser beam and, like, plummeted into the earth at terminal velocity. But he just has to go through a little physical therapy at the end of the movie. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, no, that's a major missed opportunity, in my opinion.
I agree with you there completely. That's the thing. Later in this year... this movie came out in early 2016, and I think later in this year, some night in college, I read online like the Civil War comic book. And my God, this movie gets worse when you actually like read what it's based off of. And I use that phrase loosely. Civil War as a comic book, graphic novel, what have you, is so much more interesting. It's like actually based on privacy and giving away your super identities because these teenagers with superpowers get some like kids blown up in a school, and it causes a ripple effect where it's like, well, Spider-Man thinks it's morally right to reveal his identity, but then people lives get put in danger, and it's like, well, you read the comic book and everybody has like a real personal stake in the fight, and then people do get hurt and killed in the Civil War comic book. And the good stuff in this movie is not about pitting 20 heroes against each other. Good stuff in this movie comes with the more personal battles, the Iron Man stuff, the Captain America stuff, the Black Panther stuff, the Bucky stuff for me.
Exactly. Yeah, the airport battle does nothing for me. Actually, more than anything, I just think of the negative stuff, like does anybody have orange slices and shit like that? That's just terrible and just so unfunny and dated even when it came out. With that said, the climax of the film, where you have Iron Man and Bucky taking on Iron Man, and they practically beat him near to death. That, once again, it has pathos, just like Winter Soldier. You're watching it, you're invested, you may be rooting for one side, but you don't really want either side to completely annihilate the other to the point where the other person's dead. And that's really what, when the movie is hitting its stride, when it's really excelling and doing a great job. And that's the tragedy of this film, is that there's so much potential, and it winds up being another third in a trilogy rather than like the series peaking right in the second, just like Star Wars, just like Spider-Man and so many others, and then just kind of is inconsistent in the third movie.
Terminator, Dark Knight, we go on forever.
Exactly. It's an unfortunate trend that's very, very rarely
Godfather.
Yeah. In some of those are just straight up bad third movies sometimes, but this one at least has a good movie in it. There's at least, like you said, like probably 2 hours of good content, where even some of the stuff that maybe isn't absolutely necessary, it's still well written, it's still well directed, it's still good. There's definitely, I'd say, about 20 minutes at least of actually bad content, or just stuff that the movie better without. But at least it is mostly good. And I feel bad saying so many negative things about it, but it's just, when a movie's just bad, it's just bad. When a movie's good, but it's almost great, it's kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the stuff that it doesn't do right is kind of more interesting to talk about. It's like, I could only talk about why it's awesome that Cap and Bucky are teaming up against Iron Man so much before I repeat myself. Like, Iron Man has very much good cause to want to destroy Bucky. He just learned that Bucky killed his parents. And then Steve knew about it and he lied. And it's like, holy shit. They actually, they're doing the Winter Soldier thing again. They're like pulling out some, character and plot twists actually compelling and, mean something.
Exactly. And it's just, I mean, the good news is that, eventually with their Avengers movies, they get to do these things. And there are some moments in both films, but I think a little bit more in Endgame, that feel studio mandate or fan servicey. There is some of that, but they're much more naturalistic. They're much more balanced than this movie, in my opinion. So they do develop and grow. This isn't the last chance they get to make a movie with Captain America or anything like that. We do get to see a lot more of them doing this style, and I think those films do feel in an odd way like a continuation directly from Civil War.
It really is, whether it's Captain America 3 or Avengers 2.5, Civil War really is the growing pains movie between the Whedon era in like the Russo Avengers movies era.
Definitely. And I think that was the whole second phase of Marvel in general. Was this weird, awkward, kind of angry passing of the shoving of the torch, where Whedon was like, you know what, you deal with this, it's your problem now.
Yeah, pretty much. Being said, I want to shout out the Black Panther scene in the finale too, because like everybody remembers the imagery of Cap, you know, thrusting the shield down at Iron Man and all of that stuff. But Black Panther is just as interesting as a conflict, and it's not a physical one. With the villain, you know, the villain is has accomplished what he wanted to do, and he's, you know, his family is revealed to be dead and gone, and he's ready to kill himself. And you know, I love the Black Panther movie, but this moment is still one of the best Black Panther moments. And he's, you know, he's tried to kill himself, and then he doesn't get to. And then one of my favorite lines in the whole MCU is like, "The world isn't done with you yet," and I'm just like, that is some awesome shit. That's some badass hero shit. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely one of the more memorable moments of this movie. And once again, I mean, just going back to the studio versus artist thing, I mean, we're not mentioning the most memorable moments wasn't like when Captain America punched Vision. If that even happened, you know? Or Spider-Man being like, whoa, you have a robot arm? That's awesome. Like, that's not the stuff that we're talking about years later.
No, not at all. And nor was it, you know, when the movies came out. And it's just, sometimes these Marvel movies can take the easy way out and be a little too superficial. But when they do focus in on the characters and the emotions of things, get greatness. And it's, you know, sometimes for a good movie like this one, you wish you would do that more than it did and be even better.
Yeah, the best way to sum this movie up that I could do is to say it's your least favorite flavor of Tootsie Pop. Where you're getting through, you're sucking on it, it's not your favorite flavor, it's not particularly awful or anything, but eventually you get the Tootsie center. And it's exactly what you remember from the last one that you had from your favorite flavor. And it's still got that chocolate good center. And that's the heart of the movie.
How many times do you have to lick Daniel Brohl to get to that Tootsie Roll?
You 3 times is all you can get to before you just take a crunch.
Good to know. Yeah, how many licks on a Tootsie Pop can you get in during the runtime of this movie? That's the real question.
This is only going to be relevant like until this video is uploaded. It'll probably already not be discussed. But there's been a big thing recently, because we're not going to talk about a Batman movie for a while, I can't imagine. Where it's like, does Batman give Catwoman head? And it's a huge thing, which is stupid. They're kids' comic book characters. Like, come on. Like, they're a little more mature, but like, why are we discussing cunnilingus or blowjobs or anything like that, you know? Even for the adult
Yeah,
Batman stuff.
Colton's been bringing it to my attention. I've been trying to ignore it.
With that said, I am pro Batman gives head for this reason. Why does he not have the bottom jaw in his cowl? There must be some reason.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what Colton said. Oh my god, you guys would get along great.
It's just ergonomic. His mask is built to give Catwoman head. So
both of you are the worst. You guys both said the exact same freaking dumb thing.
Yeah, that was my first thought when I heard the controversy. Like, well, obviously he does. Look at his mask.
Really, all the loved ones in my life have the same thought about Batman's mask in terms of eating out Catwoman. That's really good.
Yeah, we all have our.
I can't. Well, I was gonna say I can't think of a better note to end the Captain America podcast on, but I guess we still have to rate Civil War.
It's a really tough movie to rate. It's a really hard one. Out of all 3, this is the hardest for me to come up with an answer on. I'm gonna say it's weird. I'm gonna give it a solid B. So I think I've went from B- to B+ now to B, but like it's better than the first movie when it's good. It's as good as Winter Soldier when it's good. It's worse than both of them when it's bad, and unfortunately it's just too uneven.
I agree with that. I should really give ratings first sometimes because it always looks like I'm copying you. But I was thinking B as right when you said it as well. So I really think we're,
That's
I gave
funny.
Civil War like an A minus, but otherwise we were pretty much, you know, right across the board on
Yeah,
this
it's
night.
funny. I think these movies are kind of cut and dry in that way, which isn't really a criticism. It just seems so obvious to me that like the first one like is a
Yeah,
pretty
I
decent
agree
movie.
with that. They're not really polarizing films. They're not. I don't think the gamut of opinion on these movies is is that wide, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who like hates Winter Soldier but loves Civil War. I don't know anybody that um hates Civil War even. They might make fun of certain scenes that are kind of cringy in it, but like generally I don't know many people whose opinion differs on these movies. It's generally all the same take.
Right. Well, and Marvel's kind of good at that. They're kind of good at making movies that, are vanilla ice cream and most people like and sometimes that vanilla is like the garbage friendly's vanilla ice cream that is like passable. But every once in a while, you get that Breyer's French bean vanilla ice cream that is Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and it's just extra good vanilla.
Exactly. Well, I'm Todd
There you go. I
Crawford.
had to have a sweets metaphor since you had one.
Fair enough. I'm Todd Crawford,
And I'm Eric Zavinski.
and we are too cool for the comic shop.